RSPCA presents Animal Futures, hosted by Kate Quilton. Episode 1. Could robot pets ever replace the real thing?
Welcome to the very first episode of RSPCA Animal Futures. I'm journalist and broadcaster Kate Quilton, and today we're talking robot pets. They're being increasingly used in settings like care homes with great results. But could they ever replace the real pets that we love so much? I spoke to Ted Fischer, co-founder and CEO of Ageless Innovation, whose robot pets are helping tackle loneliness and even helping people with dementia. So, Ted, robot pets. Tell me more. Why robot pets?
Well, thank you for having me. So why robot pets? We started this brand, the Joy for All brand, about 10 years ago at Hasbro, the world's largest toy company. I was brought in to think about ways that Hasbro could leverage their assets in new markets and new channels. We chose health and wellness as sort of the larger umbrella, and within that, we found some insights that a toy that was 20-something years ago intended for 4 to 8-year-old girls was being bought by mom, not for their daughter, but about 20% of the time being bought for an aging loved one. And that insight led us to sort of really dig in. And we found two key insights. And one was when we spoke to older adults, there was this incredible need for interactive companionship. It wasn't as discussed as it is today after the pandemic, but pre-pandemic, there was already an epidemic of loneliness and isolation that was gripping our older adult population. And the other insight was that no matter how many older adults we spoke to, there was one answer. They wanted more fun, joy, and play in their life. And so we did concept testing with all sorts of different, whether it be a tablet device or arts and crafts, and far and away, this idea of an interactive companion pet rose to the top. And so in 2015, we launched the Joy for All brand as part of Hasbro. And the companion pets are these really realistic, interactive. It's this idea of give and take. So you do something, you get something in return. So you pet it or you talk to it and it meows and barks or it rolls over. And so that's why robotic pets.
Wow. And so what do these robotic pets look like?
I got to work with some amazing engineers and designers. And when we talked to older adults, they wanted realism. It was one of the top things as we said, so what does it need to do? What does it need? And they said, I want it to look like a cat. I want it to act like a cat. I want it to look like a dog. And so our pets actually are fairly life-sized. Our cats look like cats. Our dogs look like dogs. We've got 3 different breeds of the cat, 2 different breeds of the dog, and then our Walker Squawker, which is a bird. We have 2 different breeds of those birds. And the detail level of understanding the realism is, so if you have our Walker Squawker, our cardinal, the sounds are actually cardinal sounds. They're not, and then we have a bluebird and they're bluebird sounds and they sound different. They make different, chirps and so it's that level of detail. Like on the cat, our cat has technology in it. So what we heard from older adults is when cats purr, there's a tactile vibration that they feel. And that was hugely meaningful to people who are cat owners. And so we created a technology called VibraPurr so that when our cat purrs, it actually has that tactile vibration. So if it's sitting in your lap, you not only hear the purr, but you feel the purr. And those type of realism details were, I think, why to date we've got, almost 700,000 of these out around the world.
How did you settle on which breeds to make?
Yeah, great question. So
I love that because people can get very specific about, what's their
Oh,
favorite type of
very,
dog, favorite
very
type of
specific.
cat.
Yeah. Yeah. So we started with we tried to go with the most popular, right? Because we were starting this thing out. We still had to sort of prove out the concept. So in the dog category, which the cat came out first in 2015, the dog was a year later. And for that entire year, we heard from that 50% of the population, the dog lovers, like, when is the dog coming? Right? And so people are very specific. And so with the cat, the most popular cat was the orange tabby cat. And so we created that orange tabby and then a silver with white mitts, and then originally a creamy white cat. And now we've also got a tuxedo cat. And discontinued the creamy white cat because it would get too dirty pretty quickly. And then so you learn things, even though people love it. Yeah. So because people treat it like their real pet, they interact with it, and so you want to make sure that you can maintain the hygiene and do all those things. And it was harder with a white cat.
I
And then
guess the coat isn't washable. You can't just unzip and throw it in the
Yeah, you
laundry?
can unzip it and throw it in, but there is we've gone to the lengths of having an infectious disease doctor do a protocol, a cleaning protocol that actually passes every test that we need to in terms of infection control and cleaning. And so we do have it's a wipe and a spray, and it works, and it can sort of restore the cat back to anything you needed to. And then as far as the pup, the golden retriever was the most popular. So that was the pup breed
I
that we
mean, that's
came
a
up with
fan
first.
favorite in the UK for sure.
Yeah,
Golden Retriever. Okay. Wow. And so you've made what, 700,000 of these?
almost. Yeah, I mean, there's been over 600,000 pets adopted now in about 30 countries around the world.
And what is your core demographic?
So so I had mentioned that we started the brand at Hasbro in 2015. We ran it there for almost 4 years, and then it was getting more difficult inside of Hasbro to focus only on older adults, which became our passion. And so we did a friendly management spin out, and myself and the team that really conceived of this and launched it. We left Hasbro, formed Ageless Innovation, and then acquired Joy for All. And the reason that we did that is because we were so passionate about the older adult population, and we knew that there was just this incredible need for more fun, joy, and play, and very few people focused on that. So in 2018, we spun out of Hasbro, um, and we've been so our demographic is older adults and their families, and that's what we focus on. So we have the pets, and now we have games that are really reimagined for older adults to be more inclusive and fun, intergenerational, and those type of things. So that's our focus.
Can you tell me a little bit about the function? So how do these robots work?
Yeah, so it's they're self-contained technology, and inside of these pets, there's actually quite a bit of technology, and we very rarely talk about it because I'd rather kind of talk about the magic that happens
Oh,
when
well, tell me
somebody.
about the magic. I mean, what do they do? And, tell
Yeah,
me about how
so
they interact with people.
one of the things that I love about our product is the simplicity. And so basically, and I've watched it now thousands of times. You gift this or give it to someone, and they immediately name it. Either an old pet name or something that reminds them, or how it looks. Rusty or so fluffy or whatever it is, and then it's just so that you don't have to read the instructions. Like most people understand how to interact with a pet. So as you start doing it, with the cat, there's a few unique things. So cats, from all the research that we did, never do what you want them to do when you want them to do it. They're on their own schedule, and so despite the sensors and motors and things that are inside, like just because you pet the back of the cat, you're not going to get the same response every time. So it's a random, we call it a random play pattern, because that's what cats do. And so they roll over and they preen and they purr and they meow, but it's going to be on their schedule. So, you could be petting it for 10 minutes and want it to roll over and it doesn't. You turn away and then it rolls over. I mean, it's just, and then the pup's a little more predictable, right? So it responds to sound, and it has this bark back technology where you talk to it, it kind of talks back and puppy barks to you in almost the same length as what you did. And it has a subtle heartbeat for when you're resting. And we were trying to liken that to the vibropur, right? That tactile sensation as you're sort of, sitting there and sort of interacting. So there's different and unique features, and the Walker Squawker has two different modes. One where it can be just held in your hand, and you can play with it, and it'll chirp and coo, and then once you put it on, there's a perch that you put on a mobile device or a walker, and as you move, it sings songs, and the more you walk, the more songs get unlocked. So we're trying to incentivize healthy, active movement. But the real feature is, as you stop and maybe move away from your walker, it gives you a little reminder so you're not forgetting your walker. Because what we know is that about 80% of falls that happen with older adults that have walkers fall because they forget it. And so we've tried to create this really engaging, companion, but also something that's giving you some cues and reminders to not get too far from your walker.
And is there responsibility tied in, like a Tamagotchi? You know, do you have to interact?
When it is someone's, they name it, they own it, they brush it, they interact with it, and there's this that piece of I'm caring for something has been really important. So we have about 15 published research papers, some published peer reviewed, validated on the impact of loneliness, isolation, dementia, Alzheimer's, depression, um, and the positive impact that it's had. And in all of it, some of the underlying, I think, power of what we do is that when it's your pup or your cat or you feel a need to sort of care for it. And so I wouldn't go as far as Tamagotchi, type of, it's if you just leave it in the corner, it's not going to wither away or anything, but it goes into a sleep mode if you stop interacting with it. And like the cat, for instance, responds to changes in light. So I have one in my office that every morning I come in, I flick the lights on, it gives me a little meow, lets me know it's there. At night, I flick the lights off, it gives me a little meow. And whether I play with it or interact with it during the day or not, it doesn't matter. That kind of happens. And so it just depends on your use pattern and how you want to interact with it.
Oh my goodness. Have you got a lot at home?
I've got a couple of, yeah. I mean, there's always pets here. I've had, there have been times when I've had like 10 at home, and then I'll meet somebody who could really use it, so I give them away. So, but yeah, I mean, it's really interesting. So, I'll tell you a funny story. When I started this brand, my grandmother, who was she was going from assisted living to memory care, and she was in her 90s. And she was actually on our first packaging. So she was I used to call her the swimsuit model on the cover of our first box, And so, but she taught me so much, because her secret to dealing with this loss of memory and, cognitive decline was laughter. So no matter what you said, she laughed. And so I used to joke that, like, my grandma laughs at everything I say, usually before I say it. She didn't even care what was coming to my mouth. She thought I was a great, crazy grandson. I used to give her crazy gifts. And so, you know, as I watched her interact with our first versions of these pets, it just occurred to me that you know, we were all pretty close by, right? So within 10 miles of her community. But even if we visited every day, there was still 20 hours a day. She was by herself. I mean, we couldn't all be there 20 hours a day, right? So people go have meals with her and whatever. But so having something that, was sort of interactive. And as I, started to bring the concepts home, I would sit on my chair at night, and I'd be petting this cat, and my wife, who I've been married to for a long time, I've been allergic to cats my entire life. And so, she had cats when we were dating, and I used to sort of have to sit outside sometimes because I couldn't be in the house. I had this cat in my lap. My wife's like, "Hey, I've seen you do a lot of different jobs." She goes, "The cat salesman thing, I didn't see that coming. Like, I didn't see that one coming." So, it's been a joke forever that, that I started a company that makes cats, and I was allergic to them my whole life. So, and the good news about our cats, hypoallergenic, there's none of that issues. And so we have, we see stories and reviews all the time about people that have been allergic and have always wanted to love a cat and couldn't because they couldn't get near it. And now they own our cat, and they're so happy.
And so in your household, have you traded real pets entirely for robot pets?
Yeah, so we had dogs for years until the kids were at a certain age where we were traveling so much for sports and all that stuff that it just wasn't fair to leave so we haven't had live pets in the house probably for 15 years. So yeah, I guess I'm not sure we made the trade because I hadn't quite gotten to the point of Joy for All and the pets yet, but we made more of a family decision that it wasn't fair to a pet to leave it behind all the time when we were traveling all over the country, going to lacrosse games and everything.
Obviously, you've experienced both. What are the pros of a robot pet?
Yeah, so I mean, I think in the older adult population, certainly the pros are, and what we heard from older adults. It's not just what we think. It's actually what we heard from them. And is you get to a certain place in your life, and whether it be health reasons, residential requirements, longevity issues, they're just people can't own a pet any longer or have to give up their pet. We just did a delivery at a Veterans Administration home a couple weeks ago in Rhode Island, and we gave one of the vets a orange tabby cat, and he said, "Oh my gosh, this looks just like Franklin, who I had to give up to move here." So in order for him to move into the VA, they don't allow people to own pets. He had to give up his 15-year cat, and now we gave him one that looked just like it, and it was a really heartwarming story. But we see it all the time. That I think the benefit, and we talked about it a lot. We used to have our tagline was no litter box, just love, and no vet bills, just love. So we're hoping to bring that pet interaction to people who desire it but can't have it in a live pet anymore, and take some of the reasons why they can't have the live pets, the care and feeding part of it out of the equation, so that they can just enjoy it and get sort of the loving benefits.
And what kind of bonds have you witnessed emerge between, the owners and these robot pets?
Yeah, so I could tell you a lot of stories, but I'll give you just a couple of examples. So, a story that we've heard now pretty, numerous times, are so for whatever reason, whether it could be music, it could be pets, it could be whatever, there's this, thing that happens when the right thing hits. And so we've seen a number of instances where it's been given to somebody who's been nonverbal for maybe 2 years. So living in a community-based or care home setting, hasn't spoken to their family, haven't spoken to the other residents, and they get our cat, and they're like, "What a beautiful kitty," and like the room is stunned, like can't believe. So, and it's not just our product that does that, right? For some people, it's music, and there is no one thing for everyone. We know that, but we're blessed to hear that story a number of times where it's brought people to a different place than they've been, maybe for a while. And whether that's through reminiscence or it's, this the power of pets. I can't explain it, but it's magic when you do see it. So that's part of the magic too. And then the other story, that if you had told me this when we started this brand in 2015, that there would be people who these pets meant so much to, that we get letters that tell us that, so and so had this pet, and they went to hospice and they loved it so much that they, when they passed, they buried them with the pet. I don't think I could have ever imagined that our product would have that type of impact.
Gosh, that's incredible, isn't it? Do you think it's kind of, those kind of examples are fascinating, as in it makes you think, wow, do we as a society undervalue play?
Yeah.
Because for you, as someone that's reintroduced it almost to these people in the winter of their lives, they're leaning into it, aren't they?
Absolutely. And I think that, one of the biggest surprises as we went out and we were just exploring early on, is how every single older adult we spoke to wanted more play, more fun, more joy in their life. And culturally and in society, you get to a certain age and people say you're too old for that. And honestly, it's one of the things we've been trying to dispel since we started the brand, is that the power of play has these amazing benefits that no one really understands. I mean, simple things. So, and I've spoken about this before, but I had a good friend who used to visit his father every week. He would, my friend would come back and he'd say, "Geez," he goes, "my father asked me the same questions over and over every 30 seconds. So I'll answer it. And then, how are the kids?" And, he said, "Yeah." And so he said, the other day I just decided to turn it on its head. So he asked me how the kids are. And I said, "Well, Ryan just got out of prison, kind of thing." Like totally made something up. And his father reacted differently to that question. So that the questions kept coming. "So how are the kids?" He just answered it differently every time. And it became like a game between them. And it made them both laugh. Like and that's just simple play, right? There's no recipe there. It's just, you know, pe people think it's all the mundane and the difficulty of dealing with people as they get into this part of their life, and there's some pretty simple solutions, and we've found that, bringing people together around games and, making things intergenerationally fun and appropriate are so important. And if I can tell one more quick story about that, when we were doing the research on this brand, there's a place within Hasbro. It's called the Fun Lab, and the Fun Lab is the greatest place in the world. So it's sort of a controlled environment where on a normal day, one of the brands would bring their new concepts in, and it'd be like a living room setting or a bedroom setting, and then they'd bring a bunch of kids in. They'd sit behind a glass wall and they'd watch it all happen and take notes and figure out what's easy to get, what needs more instruction, what's not working. And so we brought a very different population into the Fun Lab one day. And the person who runs the Fun Lab, which by the way is a great job, she said this was the
That's a
best
great
day.
gig, isn't it?
She said, yeah, she said, this is the best day we've ever had. I'm like, really? So we're sitting there watching older adults interacting with all these things. And there was like, they were all happy, but there was this added joy in the room. And I talk about this actually a lot. I was trying to put my finger on it. We're sitting there, and what I realized is kids get in that room, they expect to play. So the expectation is you run and there's toys. That's what I do. The older adults were not only having fun, but they were so happy that someone was thinking about them in this way, that they are people who should have joy and fun and play in their life. So it was the added level of joy was just this. These folks were like, gosh, someone's finally thinking about the things we actually want, right? More fun, more joyful play. So that was sort of the epiphany of how we said we're on to something here and launched the brand. But that was the day that sort of the light bulb went off.
Gosh, that's fascinating, isn't it? I think just for you to have acknowledged, actually, there's a real need for play, whatever age you are,
100%.
whatever point you are in your life. And why is it, do you think, these robot pets help people with dementia in particular?
Yeah, it goes back to kind of what I said before. I think there's just this reminiscence piece. There's this familiarity piece, and we found even with sort of non-pet owners, non-pet lovers, that just having something that is sort of interactive. And so we've seen situations where in some of the studies that I talked about earlier, um, an older adult who maybe has dementia, living in a care home, memory care home, and really has a difficult time with transitions or agitation. And in some cases, the answer is medication, right? Psychotropic medications. There have been studies of our pets where instead of that, they give the cat, and people just joyfully kind of make the transition and don't get agitated. And don't try and take it away from them, but as what we heard. But once they have it, their demeanor changes.
So, as the world advances and we look into the crystal ball, what does AI mean for this space for robot pets?
Yeah, that's the $1 million question, right? So we've been thinking a lot about it. So we've won in the U.S. a National Science Foundation grant with Brown University and their Humanity Centered Robotics Initiative to explore that. So we spent about 5 years doing some research, trying to figure out. And this was before the advent of like the Chat GPTs of the world. That was just AI was defined a little differently than it is today, where it's just so much more robust. And most recently, we went through AARP, which is the big national organization here that represents older adults. They have an age tech collaborative accelerator. So we went through the accelerator program and did another segment on it, really exploring, what does a connected device look like? What does an AI device look like? And I won't sit here and tell you that we have the answer, but certainly I think one of the unique differentiators I think we have, and the connected home is coming. It's already here in some cases, right? Where there's a lot of monitoring going on, whether it's through sensors or cameras and those type of things. I'm a big proponent of dignity, and there's a fine line between if my grandmother were alive, what I would want, for her and her life at what stage to be, what are we watching? What are we doing? So, I think almost all of those products that are part of that connected environment, if you will, are not for the older adult, right? They're there to monitor the older adult and provide information maybe for somebody who cares, which I'm not saying it's a bad thing. I'm just saying, but our product is actually for the older adult. It's something they want to interact with. And so our challenge is to figure out, with all of the developments in AI and technology, how can we take that and still maintain that really fine balance of, but not being invasive and being respectful and dignity. But what are the things that we can do with a device that they're happily interacting with, to provide some additional benefit, right? So whether that's, user functionality or data or information for people who care about, their well-being, how do we do that? And so I don't have the answer for you, but we're definitely working on it.
And I mean, when you look at, I guess, the growth in recent years, Can you see a world where most homes will have a robot pet in the future?
I'm not advocating for this to be something for everyone, right? If we truly have a person-centered design philosophy and mentality at our company, we've never designed a product without older adult without them. We go ask them what they want. We don't build it, and they will come, and we iterate. Like it's a process. Like we have care homes and nursing homes, and we visit them often. We bring things. They tell us what's right, what's wrong. We go back and tinker, and we go back and say, did we get it right? And they say yes or no. And so, I think that there's certain situations where the products that we make are really relevant and are helping people. And I think there's a lot of situations where you see the pet in the family and the love of a dog. Those like I'm not trying to replace that, right? I'm trying to make sure that everybody has that opportunity at the time when they might need it, as opposed to say, yeah, every home should have a robotic pet. I think anybody who needs one and wants one should be able to have one. So I think the option should be there. But I really believe that I don't see a world where we're replacing pets. Pets are why I've got one team member right now who's dealing with. She has two big dogs, and one of them is in not in very good shape. And I've watched how it's impacted her over the last few weeks, and just it's part of the family, and it's something that's really meaningful to people. And I'm not trying to replace that. I'm just trying to say, hey, what are the when you get to a place where that's not an option, is there something that can give you some type of or similar joy?
Brilliant. Full power to you, Ted. I mean, as the inventor, maker, and seller of robot pets, that would have been a very easy question to say, oh, yeah, hell yeah, everyone needs one of these in their lives. But I love how they're completely bespoke for the people that you make them for, and they're tailored for these older people that ultimately are in a position where a real life pet maybe isn't quite practical.
Right. You got it.
Thank you so much for that, Ted. I love how all of it is inspiration to play. We must play more as people.
I totally agree. Thanks so much for having me, and we really appreciate and respect the work of the RSPCA. And we have some great collaborations here in the United States, and anything we can do to improve the lives of older adults, whether it's through real pets or robotic pets or games and toys. Let's make sure that they have the ability to have fun, joy, and play in their lives.
Fantastic. Thank you so much, Ted.
Thank you. Thanks for having me.
What do you think? Could robot pets have a role to play? If this chat has sparked your interest, you can get involved in the biggest ever conversation about animal welfare, Animal Futures, the big conversation. This is your chance to have your say on the future you want to see for animals. Search the RSPCA website to find out more. Next, I spoke to Dr Leanne Proops, Associate Professor in Animal Behaviour and Welfare at the University of Portsmouth. She's been researching how children respond to robot pets and their use in therapy. Hi, Leanne. Thanks so much for having a chat with us.
Oh, pleasure to be here. Thanks.
Now, can you tell me first, tell me how your journey began with robot pets?
So my research is in animal behaviour and animal welfare, particularly with domestic animals, horses and donkeys primarily actually, but also dogs, cats sometimes. So I'd done a little bit of research looking at the therapeutic potential of horses, so equine therapy. My background is also psychology in general, so I'm interested in those sort of human-animal interactions. But coming to robot pets, I really have Olivia Barber to thank for that. So she was a former student of mine who led some of these studies. So she came to me as a master's student, and she had a therapy pet, and was really keen to look into sort of the roles of therapy pets. We initially did some research with looking at children reading to dogs in school classrooms. And then we just really wanted to look initially at comparing dogs and trying to understand what it was about dogs that seemed to be beneficial to people. So we wanted some kind of comparison object entity that was as close to a dog as we could get without actually being alive, because we really wanted to understand if it's something really special about a living dog, or whether other objects and other similar entities, if you like, could have similar effects. So that's really where we started with this.
And tell me about your recent studies. So where did you get to?
So we have done a number of studies looking at, so in particular, children's responses to dogs and therapy pets. We have 3 studies across 3 different contexts, really, that we looked at. The first study, we went into schools and we provided children with the opportunity, so this was 11 to 12-year-olds, with the opportunity to interact with a real therapy dog or a robot dog, or they had one session with a therapy dog and it was just a free play session. So we provided them with toys and balls and things that they could interact with the dog with. And we just sort of let them lead the experience and we recorded their behaviors. And then we also offered a similar session with a robotic biomimetic robot. So one that was designed to look like an animal, but actually this particular one is a Miro E that we used, and it was just a general animal-like creature. So it wasn't designed to look at particularly like one particular animal. So we let the children just interact with those 2 entities on 2 separate sessions, and then we just asked them how much they enjoyed the experience, how they felt, sort of how their emotions, how they felt during the experience. And we also asked them their attitudes to dogs and robots in general. So we wanted to understand both how children interact with these entities, but also how they felt about them and how it made them feel. So that was our first study. The second study, we took a similar idea, but we went into a Winchester Science Centre in the UK. So it was a much more naturalistic environment. It was very busy. Children were coming in and out, and we set up an area in the Science Centre where people had the children had the opportunity to come and meet a therapy dog, the robot animal, and then we had a sort of very basic toy dog that would just walk around and bark when you pressed it. And the children were just sort of able to come and go, choose which individual they wanted to meet, or but all 3 if they wanted to. And we just watched children's choices, how they interacted, and again, what they thought about the experience. And then the third one was just an online study where we showed videos of dogs and robot toys, and again asked the children, which one would you like to interact with, how much do you like them, and what they thought about them.
And what did you uncover? What were the results?
So it was really interesting, actually. So in the school study with the older children, they spent more time with the robot actually than the real dog in the sessions. But they actually sort of tended to prefer spending time with the dog. So even though they spent more time sort of exploring with the robot, they still had that preference, but they really enjoyed interacting with both. And that was the same at the Science Centre. So children spent a bit more time with the dog, actually, or similar time, sorry, with the dog and the robot at the Science Centre. But overall enjoyment was really high. So we said, out of 10, how much did you enjoy this experience? And they reported really sort of positive emotions with both. So overall, in terms of behaviour, it was all very positive. But again, interestingly, when we looked at the exact behaviours, so we looked in a bit more detail at exactly what they were doing with the dogs and the robots, and they spent more time stroking the dog, and then they spent more time doing what we called investigative behaviours with the robot, so kind of probing it and trying to understand how it was made, or touching it in ways that we didn't see them sort of interacting with the dog. So we could tell that even though there's sort of similar amount of time interacting, they kind of knew the difference between the two, and they were sort of exploring them and interacting with them in different ways. And occasionally we saw, so when they might poke the eye of the robot to try and see how the eye was opening and closing, but thankfully we didn't see any behaviours like that with the real dog.
Why do you think the kids spent more time playing with the robot?
Well, we don't know, and so this is only a sort of guess, really. I think there are two reasons that I've think might be possible. The first one might just be a novelty value. So children are much more familiar with dogs than these kind of sort of high tech robots. We have lots of cuddly toys, so it could just be that it was a new object. So they were spending more time exploring that, and I think research needs to really look at long term effects a bit more. I think that's something we don't understand very well at the moment. And the other thing which was quite interesting that we found is we also looked at the behavior of the dog and of the robot. And the biomimetic robot was often much more responsive to the child, so would engage a bit more sometimes than the dog. So that could be part of it. And that's perhaps one of the potential benefits of robots, is that if you train them to always be attentive to the human, it doesn't need to go off and sleep, and it doesn't get bored. So that could be part of the reason as well.
That's interesting, isn't it? So the robot was actually more responsive than the real dog.
Yeah, I mean,
Oh,
there'll be different dogs and different relationships, of course.
yeah,
I think of
yeah.
my dog who will, play fetch for hours and hours on end and not seem to get bored of it. But yeah, the robot obviously can be sort of programmed to do that as well.
What do you think the benefits of robot pets could be now and in the future?
The most obvious sort of, or perhaps less controversial place that robots have a role is in contexts where it's not appropriate for real dogs to be. I think it can be very stressful for dogs to go into certain therapeutic environments. Sure, many dogs are quite resilient and enjoy meeting new people, but I think there is quite a lot of research now that shows that even if the dog seems okay, it can often be quite a difficult and stressful experience. I think we can probably empathize with that. So I think that there is a real role for robot pets in places where either the welfare of the dog, it wouldn't be appropriate really to have dogs in that environment, or in sort of pet contexts where people just can't keep pets. So if you haven't got the time, or you haven't, got the funds, or you're not perhaps someone who isn't just physically able to go for a walk, things like that, then I think that's really where robot pets can play an important role.
What kinds of settings are you thinking of?
Well, there's been some research. So in terms of therapy, again, probably say this again, there's not a great deal of research out there, but a couple of contexts where it seems quite beneficial. The first one is in an elderly homes and with people with dementia. There's been a number of studies that show that these robotic pets, so Paro the seal is one of them that has been used quite successfully in that context. And there was a recent, really nice, really controlled and longer term study that was done by researchers in Plymouth. And they, again, found that with people with dementia, they really benefited from having this robotic pet in the environment. And these are sort of potentially challenging environments to have a dog. You may not have the resources as well. The staff would have to keep a real dog, and so there would be lots of difficulties. And it's probably in that context, it could well be more beneficial to use a robotic dog. I guess in terms of the context, one thing I thought was particularly interesting about their findings was that those people with more severe dementia used this robot dog more. And it actually, not only did it reduce loneliness and depression, it actually reduced some very specific dementia symptoms like delusions, which I found really interesting, because perhaps you might
Yeah.
you might expect that having a robotic pet or a real pet would reduce loneliness, but these sort of particular delusions or particular symptoms that it actually seemed to reduce, I found really fascinating, and something we need to understand a bit more about. There's also been some positive work with people with autism. Again, that might be a good context. Perhaps the people are not able to look after animals, or perhaps they prefer a robotic dog. They might, obviously everybody's an individual, but there might be contexts where people find dogs challenging or scary, or they're allergic to dogs. And in that context, the robotic pet could step in and provide a relationship where a real dog couldn't.
Mm-hmm. Have you got any concerns about replacing animals with technology?
Yes, it's a tricky one, that one, isn't it? I think overall, in terms of the robotic pets, I am not too concerned at the moment with where we are with this. There's lots of research to suggest that we are very able to distinguish between animate and inanimate objects, and we know the difference between the two. And so I don't think, I think there will be separate roles for them in society. I think there are many contexts, as I've said, where perhaps animals are not being kept in the best conditions. And so perhaps it's no bad thing if a few less pet dogs are in, in society, and they're being replaced, if it means that there are less dogs being kept in, poor environments. So, we're very busy increasingly as a culture here in England. It's very hard for people to spend time with their dogs. There are less dogs kind of working alongside us through our day. And so it's a difficult one, but I think if robot pets are used in those contexts, then I think that might be no bad thing for the animals themselves as well.
And what would you say to people that maybe, I mean, particularly with kids, when some people might feel like, oh, it's a bit sad, isn't it? These kids playing with a robot rather than a real animal. What do you think about that?
I think, first of all, it was very clear in all of our research that the children tend to prefer the real dog. So it's not that the children are, as far as we can work out, if you said, would you like a real dog for Christmas? Or, would you like a real dog at home? Or would you like a robotic pet? Our research suggests that they're not going to choose the robotic pet. So first of all, I think that if there is a space for real dogs, real pets in children's lives, I think they're still going to want to do that. And it's very clear from our research that there's a preference for the living dogs. So I think that it's only sad if it depends what you compare it to. So it's not sad if you don't have the option of a dog and you're therefore do have the option of a robotic pet. Then perhaps if we look at it in that way and perhaps switch the way we're thinking, that it's not the comparison is not, do you have the real dog or the robot? It's nothing or the robot, because if you can't have it, do you see what I mean? So I think it's just about
totally.
the comparison that we make, or having a dog in an environment that is not ideal for it because the family doesn't have time for the dog, then the robot may be a preferable alternative.
And so you see, obviously, the advantages to animal welfare potentially with this.
Obviously, robotic pets don't have any of the problems of having to feed it and look after it. So if they are used in places where dogs shouldn't be used, or other pets shouldn't be used, then I think that that is a benefit, really. And if that means that only people that really have the time and the financial security and those kinds of things take up pets, then I think that has that welfare benefits. Again, if robots can be used in therapeutic contexts where it might be very stressful for the dog, then again that will be welfare benefits for the dog.
So you yourself, you don't have a robot pet in any way?
I don't have a robot pet in any way. No, I don't.
And would you feel, I guess, any desire to have one alongside a real pet for you?
I don't think I would do at the moment in this context. I can't imagine I would. I feel like it, because I do feel that it's kind of qualitatively different personally for me, and that might be why in some contexts it may work and in others it doesn't. But yeah, I can imagine not looking after it if I had to, getting bored with it. So I don't think I have an interest in that at the moment. Maybe when I'm older and I don't have a dog and I can't look after a pet, perhaps that will change.
It's interesting, yeah, because you've got kind of the real McCoy. Why would you need that right now? But yeah, I mean, you totally see a place for them. I mean, I have some dear friends who I've known for a really long time, and at the moment they're in a period of, ill health, and they're really struggling to walk their dogs, and you see at different times of people's lives. Okay, actually, maybe looking ahead, walking a dog
Yeah,
once a day, twice a day, it's not feasible anymore. So then what is the alternative? And I mean, a robot dog could be a good option.
it could be. It could be. And they're getting more realistic again. So at the moment, perhaps not, but who knows, as AI becomes better and then they're only going to become more realistic, aren't they? So
And what is on the horizon when it comes to AI and robot pets?
I think there's much more scope for these pets to be tailored to individual responses and individual needs, and you could potentially input, I'm sure, different personalities, if you like, or kind of program it to behave in particular ways that you would like them to behave. I I haven't. I don't know what people are developing at the moment, but kind of thinking about these questions, I think again in therapeutic contexts, there could even be potentials to exactly program these robotic therapy animals to be responsive in particular ways that the therapist perhaps thinks will be required in the therapy sessions. And I think that's quite an interesting prospect, to have the much more individually tailored, programmable, to different needs, really. I think is quite fascinating.
Japan has recently launched the AI powered pet called a Mouflin. Have you seen that?
I have, yes. It's like a little fluffy hamster.
What do you think about that? Is it kind of a sign that actually this is going to become more widespread?
I think these things. I think technology is becoming more widespread, so I think robotic pets will probably follow that trend. As I say, to the extent to which it actually replaces real animals, like we'll have yet to see. Japan is a culture that really embraces these artificial pets. So I think they were perhaps naturally receptive to this idea of robot pets more than we are in the UK. But I do think that as with all sort of technology, it seems to be generally going in the direction that there will be more of these.
Now, I guess this discussion as part of this project with the RSPCA kind of can be quite emotive. Why do you think that is? Do you think there's kind of a deep-seated fear of us moving in this direction, or fear of robots?
Um, I mean, I think there's certainly fear of robots. We find it very unsettling to see these robots that are quite human-like. It's interesting, actually. I'm not sure if we have that quite the same effect when it's animal-like. So I've seen some fairly sort of convincing animal-like robots, and there are sort of ethical questions around that, but I don't get that sort of emotive response in quite the same way as you do with the human robots. But I think with any new technologies, people are can be nervous of that, and I think with new technologies, there are inevitably. I think we're discovering that more and more with our new technologies. There are benefits and there are drawbacks, and it's not all necessarily positive and going in the same direction. So I think it's understandable to be wary of the kind of introduction of robot pets, and I can completely understand that we don't want to see animals disappearing from our lives and being replaced by these robotic creatures. So I can understand that there is, and I can understand why there would be that concern for that. We know as well, this is sort of in the backdrop really of people not spending much time in nature with natural objects, with other living creatures, and we know that how beneficial it is to spend more time in nature. So I think there is potential sort of problems with new technologies and with new robotic pets just as much as there are potential benefits. Same with things like social media. We know that there is research that it can be a great social resource for people to connect when they can't connect in real life, when they maybe need to find their particular sort of groups and they're not surrounded by them in the real life. You can connect with people online, and that's hugely beneficial. But at the same time, there is the flip side of it being often very problematic and being a very negative social space. So I think that's could be potentially the same situation with robotic animals, human-like robots, that there will be, if we're careful in certain contexts, there will be certain benefits, but there could potentially still be those drawbacks as well. And I think that's what we see across sort of new technologies.
Where do you think we're going to be in 50 years' time?
It's really fascinating. I think they will be more realistic. So I think undoubtedly they're going to be more sophisticated. They're going to have potential to learn over time and adapt their behaviors. I don't think we will see them replacing live animals sort of across the board. I think we will maintain that desire to commune with animals we know are alive. So I don't think that we're going to lose our real pets as a result of that. But I do think that there will be some really, really technologically interesting robotic pets out there. I actually think that there's a debate going on now with AI sort of more generally about, well, when will we know that it becomes sentient, if it becomes sentient? And actually the ethics might be, do we have to start treating our robotic pets more like real pets rather than the other way around, and make sure that we do, that we do care for them? We may be in 50 years' time at a point where we are asking those questions a bit more readily.
Wow, that's fascinating. So actually in 50 years' time, we might be required to care for our AI pets as much as we care for our real pets.
It's certainly a debate that people are having around AI generally. When will we know that it's feeling things? And if a creature feels things, we then have a moral obligation to treat it ethically. So we may be in that position where we're actually asking, well, what are the ethics of robot pets rather than replacing the real pets? And I think that's quite an interesting discussion.
Wow. It's almost kind of, I guess just technology advancing to such a degree whereby actually maybe there's not going to be a cat's whisker between the two of them.
I mean, have you read The Android's Dream of Electric Sheep or Blade Runner? So that's very much about that question. They can create replicant humans and pets, and so the real animals still are very much a sought after commodity, but they are essentially indistinguishable from the robotic counterparts. So maybe we'll be there.
Thank you so much. That was brilliant. While robots might not replace our pets anytime soon, there are some situations where they could have very real benefits. The role of robot pets is just one area explored in the RSPCA's Animal Futures Project. To find out more, search Animal Futures. See you on the next episode. Thanks for listening.
Animal Futures was hosted by Kate Quilton, with thanks to our guests this episode, Ted Fischer and Dr Leanne Proops. The series was produced by Mark Adams, Chris O'Brien, Emily Prideaux, and Joe Toscano.